How you doing?
Brian is in his meeting,
Good.
isn't he? What meeting is that for? Oh, yes. That's due. It is good to see the people. My car? I can't run anymore. No, I did walk past your house not too long ago. Yeah, I can't run anymore. My knees hurt. Just saw, yeah. Sweet. Is he from Wold? Oh. Hey,
How's it going?
good.
Oh my gosh, 402. I'm sorry.
Yes. Thank you. You're the best.
Didn't know if it was a 1 can or 2 can night. So I got 2.
And that's the wrong liquid too, by the way. Give me down that. Oh, it's planning. You know what? Oh, did you? You're the best.
I lost my phone in the car that time.
Oh shit. You left it in the car?
Yeah.
On purpose?
No.
So you can get out of here?
So you can leave? I may have to step out for a quick second.
I'd like to call the social workshop to order. And this is our informational meeting for the community center. Can you please do roll call?
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Schwer?
Here.
Councilmember Wong? Here. Councilmember Nordby?
Here.
Mayor Monge?
Here. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved, Your Honor.
So move, Councilmember Wong.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Swear. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Topics.
Thank you, Mayor. This is strictly a meeting for discussions on the community center this evening. We have Jonathan Luce here from Wold that's going to be discussing and kind of how we got here and potential aspects of moving forward. So turn it over to you, Jonathan.
Do you have the materials up here?
Yeah, they should.
I appreciate it, Brian. Thank you, Mayor, Council, for having us here, having me by myself here. Paige couldn't make it tonight. Again, I think this has been kind of a long road for us to gather all the information we needed to, but really, we took kind of two different steps in the process. One was understanding the condition of the facility, and one was understanding the potential purpose for the facility as well. So that's kind of how our presentation breaks down a little bit. We've got essentially that facility assessment that you have that full report with you, I think, as well, that shows at least that snapshot in time when we did that visit, maybe a year and a half ago now, where we understood kind of all of the potential deferred maintenance items that were out there. And when we use the term deferred maintenance, it's not a bad thing. It just means that there's things that have to be done. And oftentimes things do get deferred for budget reasons or priorities, or just because it just hasn't been gotten to yet. So that's kind of what contributed to that list. Certainly, I know that the cities continue to make improvements to that building even today. And so there's potentially some modifications within that report. We haven't gone back and done like a whole update of it. But we have done is update the costs so that they're kind of real time for if you're going to move forward with something within there. So if you see some differences from previous presentations to now, that's sort of contributing to that difference, is really just us projecting inflation. That's all. And then the sort of community input piece was the other big thing that we looked at, was trying to gather what maybe support or partnerships or even just general thoughts there were on the use of the facility. And so that's sort of that other big component of our, presentation that we have. Brian, were you able to pull that up, or? Oh, I can just kind of talk through it. Do you have it in front of you at all, or? Okay. So again, I think where this started was, our core planning group, a couple of our council members, thank you for being a part of that. If you recall, sort of Craig was a part of that group as well, to sort of initiate the start of that discussion. And a few other key folks from the city helped sort of move this process forward. So we had, multiple different meetings with that group to sort of bounce things off of and make sure that the process was being followed and that we were making sense of what was happening. I think the other big thing that we did was sort of establish some guiding principles about what we were going to do. I've listed them here, and as we go back and reflect on those, I think our core planning group has been on sort of a long path of what we discovered along the way here. We haven't had a meeting for quite some time as a group, but I imagine that we may look at these guiding principles and think that there would be some potential modifications to those. But again, haven't had a full meeting with our core group for quite some time. But I'll just state the three sort of major guiding principles. One is the true cost of operating the facility must match or exceed the community's interest. It must be justifiable to the city's residents. The second is the facility should promote the potential Parks and Recreation Department and become an asset that they could then manage and operate. And then the third is the project should build on the momentum of the resident engagement sessions to create relevant and usable community space. Now, the third one is sort of reflective of part of what we did throughout the process. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but as a part of that community input process, we met with about 22 different groups within North St. Paul, whether it was businesses or churches or other nonprofit entities. And of those groups, I think there was a large majority that had some amount of support for this building being used as a community center. And so that's the third one, sort of projects that there would be some momentum already, only insofar as we heard that from the community. We didn't put that out in front beforehand. So then just kind of going back to our agenda, just walking through that facility assessment piece of it. I don't think I'm going to spend time like reading every single thing on these slides. I don't know that that's beneficial for anybody individually. I can certainly go back to this and look at individual items, but I think the major components of the building are really the exterior, so roof, walls, just kind of making it weatherproof, and then some of the infrastructure needs of the facility too that are just aging. So that'd be like mechanical systems, and then some of the electrical components that are just at past their useful life. So that's really what contributes to a lot of the items that are in here. I think, again, like I said, some of those have been addressed, maybe even since we put this report together. But that sort of led us to try to prioritize some of those items. And a lot of times those priorities are reflective of how it might play into some other project or some other investment you would make at that facility. Let's just suggest you had a building with two different rooms, right? And room one needed carpet replacement and room two was perfect. And if you're gonna go through and renovate room two, would you then just decide to replace the carpet in room one as well? And so sometimes you reprioritize things based on what you think the project is gonna be, so you're not spending money twice or something like that. In this case, we kind of looked at the facility assessment on its own, irrespective of what the rest of that sort of engagement process and potential use of the facility might be. And that was just so we could get that true snapshot in time of what the deferred maintenance costs were. And what that also meant is the priorities that we put together really had more to do with the timeline and maybe the size of the work as well. So as you look through that report and see some things that are, priority one, those are ones that not just Wold, but in concert with Ron and the city felt like were high priorities. So a roof that's leaking certainly would become a priority one. If there was some other major life safety issue, that would percolate up to a priority one. And so that's sort of how those priorities were made. We usually sort of assign priorities based on some agreement about what those are, how those are defined, and that's indicated here. But then we do it in concert with the core planning group and city facility folks as well to make sure that there's alignment on what they think is major, because when we just go out to a building and see something, that's different than them looking at it and saying, well, that's leaking, and if it wasn't when I was there, it's hard to really capture that. So I think that kind of gets us to the point where we've got a report that's pretty robust. It really tells you what the cost of some of these repairs are gonna be, and it gives you a guide as to when some of those repairs or deferred maintenance items should occur. So that kind of closes out that, at least the report portion of that. As I stated before, we updated the cost to be reflective of, if you were gonna say, start all of those projects within the next few months, then we're talking about probably construction starting in, 6 to 8 months or something, just for time to design that and get a set of bid documents out for it. Now, oftentimes those get broken into smaller projects. But for the purposes of today, we just looked at it and said, okay, what's the whole package look like? If you were just gonna, put everything into the building and get it all done, which I'm not sure that we would necessarily suggest, because there are those priorities that kind of help you delineate what has to be done now and what could be done later. But again, just as a summary, if you skip forward to, I don't know, probably slide 10. So again, the inflated costs are just projecting somewhere between like 6 to 8% inflation per year going out. And what we typically look at is the state of Minnesota establishes construction cost inflation tables. So it's not just kind of us, putting our finger in the air and deciding what we think an inflation amount is gonna be. We kind of use historical and projected data that the state of Minnesota puts together for construction projects. So again, that overall project cost is that $6.3 million deferred maintenance cost, we'll say. And when we say project cost, that's inclusive of not just what the contractor's price is for that project, but it's inclusive of all of the soft costs as well. So that's any sort of design fees, testing, plan review costs for the city or the state, all of those sort of ancillary costs that go into that, as well as, typically a 10% or more contingency. When we're this early on in the process of looking at some of those items, it doesn't do us any good to tell you what the cheapest price is gonna be. We want you to try to budget for a project and give you a contingency so that if you're gonna move forward with something, you wouldn't be left, with $6.8 million worth of projects. It really should be reflective of the all-in cost to cover the items that are in there. When we look at just sort of the investment in the facility, and I think that that's another thing that we kind of wanted to gather as a group, was understanding, you know, what are the costs of the improvements here? And is it worth spending this kind of money on this building? And from just a very sort of objective viewpoint, there's a national facility managers department that uses this facility condition index. And so it's kind of an industry standard amongst facility managers to use that. And the facility condition index is really just essentially the cost of the repairs versus the cost to essentially rebuild the building exactly as it is. Exclusive of, you know, land acquisition or site costs or anything, what you're really trying to do is say, if you're going to replace this building in kind, how does that compare to what the cost of those improvements are? And so that's what that facility condition index gives you. Right now, we're at like 45.5%, and generally anything that's at or below 50 is really considered a building that people would typically still want to invest money into. So I think this just tells us that you're still within that threshold. But bear in mind too, that of the 6.3 million, we identified that there's different priorities in there, so you don't necessarily have to do a lot of those. And a lot of those things could continue to be deferred, or some of them could be done directly by facility staff within the city. Thereby, you wouldn't be paying labor costs necessarily. You're kind of just absorbing it into the facility's existing, you know, operating budget potentially. Now, we didn't get into funding mechanisms for this particular piece of the project necessarily. So I'm just sort of suggesting some avenues that we've seen happen in the past. But again, ways to kind of cut back on that overall price tag that's up here right now. Any questions about that sort of just broad overview of the facility assessment, the process that we went through, or just individual cost items or anything like that?
Anyone? Okay, continue.
That's way too easy.
Oh, we're not done.
Oh, I appreciate that. The next piece of this is really sort of all of the different groups that we met with, and we summarized some of the information from all the different, we'll just call them community partners that are out there. We can go back to any one of these individual groups. I have this in here for, you know, your own purposes to look at now, or, you know, previously when you received the information. But I think globally, like I said, really of the 22 different groups we met with, I would say there's a minimum of 80% of those that really had support for some component of this building. And whether that was direct partnership, or just felt like there was a good use for it, or maybe just felt like this was a good component for the city to provide as a, you know, as a community, there was some positive sort of support for that building continuing to be a city facility and continuing to be a community center. When we looked at the individual spaces early on in our study, and I think I always use this example with our core planning group, is we wanted to meet with those groups to understand if we were going to make some holistic changes to the building, is there support for that, and what would that cost? And the reality is, you know, we maybe heard a couple groups say, like, we could really use a community pool. Well, I think we kind of knew early on that we weren't going to be doing a pool addition to this project. But just as an example, what we wanted to do was understand if there was some sort of modest changes that could be made within the facility to be more suited towards the community's need, then we would sort of program out that, you know, plan and maybe do some schematic diagrams or something like that, and then identify a cost for that. At the end of this whole process, I think what we really found is that the spaces that that building provides really are adequate for what the community was looking for. And that would be a gym. The walking track was certainly something that was attractive to a lot of folks. That would be those meeting rooms kind of adjacent to the library. So there's a lot of discussion about just a community gathering or community meeting space. Various different sizes of those were requested by the different groups, whether it was, using the gym for some larger meeting or just using the meeting room for some smaller sort of individual group within the city. I think all of those spaces as they exist today, barring any deferred maintenance work that has to occur within those, really there was a lot of support for the building sort of, I'll say, as is. So that just told us that there was not a lot that had to be invested from holistic changes or renovation to the building. More of what we were looking at then was really reflecting back on that sort of deferred maintenance cost and saying it could really be used almost as is, but in order to have it be a viable facility, you would want to reinvest those dollars with that deferred maintenance cost so that you're kind of resetting the lifespan of the facility and its infrastructure as well. So those are sort of the big takeaways from the community feedback, and then I sort of got into some of those conclusions that I think our core planning group started to assess. If we jump to, we kind of have something called recommendations on here on slide 34, but I don't know that we're necessarily making any recommendation right now. I would just reflect and say the condition of the facility and knowing that that facility condition index and the deferred maintenance costs support sort of reinvestment if there's a use for the building. And the community, I think we sort of heard, and our core planning group heard, that there is support for use for the facility. And so with those couple of things and with receiving, state dollars in the, previous bonding bill, there's definitely sort of some momentum around potentially utilizing that community center and having some strong support there and saying this is a building that is, from our architectural opinion, worth reinvesting in. Now, I know that there's other factors at play, like how you would operate it and who would actually be in there, and I'm sure that that's more of the discussion that potentially takes place tonight, but I think that's kind of the summary of our sort of work that we went through and some of just high-level conclusions that we found as a part of that. I don't know, 20, 15 minutes? I can go back to any specific piece of information, but I wanted to just kind of give that broad brush stroke of the study and kind of cut to some of the discussion.
The study shows that there were the businesses reached out to. Was any community members involved in it?
Yeah. When you say that, do you mean like individual community members?
As in individuals that live in North St. Paul themselves.
Yeah, there was actually another community meeting that took place sort of as a side discussion from our group that the city went through, and I think that there was just some community feedback that there was support there. I wasn't actually at that meeting, but that was sort of another component that kind of fed into really and probably echoed a lot of what we heard from some of the local businesses. And some of those businesses have residents in the city as well, not just outside people.
I can add to that a little bit. There was one meeting open to the public, and Dr. Walden was at that, and I was at that as well. And they did open it up to what public needs they'd want. There was maybe 30 to 35 people there. Maybe not quite half of them were just the kids that they brought along, but they had ideas of, that's where some of the information came in, that if we could open it up to seniors, we could open it up to kids, and it was just kind of a throw it all out there to see what kind of needs the community may want or need.
Any more with your presentation, or is that you wrapped up?
That's what I have. I'm here to answer any other questions.
All right, just want to make sure there was nothing else.
Yep,
By the way, we appreciate you putting this together. Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
And working with the city.
So, Jonathan, I just want to personally thank you. We've dated for a long time now. There's a few of us. There's a few of us in here that have some tenure together.
Sure.
I definitely appreciate you what you brought forward. I think you did a very nice job presenting and bringing everybody up to speed with kind of where the building is, where the investment can be, where the investment should be, whether it's the building's not in too bad of shape yet that, a little investment in the infrastructure of the building is still good. I like the fact that you addressed on roughly about 80% of the businesses in North St. Paul support the fact of the community center in one shape or form. There was a whole lot of information shared on what exactly those uses will be, and I think some of that is in this document as well. So I appreciate you bringing that information forward. Because to date, a lot of what we've really talked about is just the financial aspect of what it could cost the city and what each individual, would be responsible and be on the hook for. We haven't talked revenue sources, we haven't talked who would use it, we haven't talked long-term strategy, we haven't addressed any of that yet. So I appreciate you starting to bring that information forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't, there's one maybe big component that I didn't mention of the building that really is very important, is the actual library. So that was something that I think there was extremely strong support for the library here. And the use of the library here tends to be very high. After we met with Ramsey County on site, there's a lot of folks that have needs for technology support that they don't otherwise have at home. And so there's a lot of use for technology in the library. And as one of two, they're only one of two leased libraries that Ramsey County has. This is one of the probably libraries kind of, I don't know if it's like per capita or by square footage, but it definitely has a lot of traffic maybe compared to some of the other libraries that they've got. So just want to mention that that's another strong component of the building that exists and operates today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We also did meet with the library today as just to see where they were at, and they're very happy with this facility. They were even saying that this is more attended than Mounds View, so it's 50 to 60,000 or more people a year had been using this, I guess. So they're really excited about being here and want to continue that relationship in whatever format we have going forward.
Can I ask a question about the library? You use the word lease. My understanding is it's a zero-cost lease, so is that correct?
So the agreement was they did the upfront cost to build the addition of the building, which was, the building itself was a little over $500,000, and then they put $200,000 worth of like books and furniture and things like that in there, with the agreement that then their monthly lease cost is $1 a month, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
For how many, so for 20
For 20 years,
So
excuse me.
that is up this year.
There's some debate about that, so
So the records aren't accurate.
unfortunately, there wasn't a signed agreement at first. And when it caught the attention of the powers that be at the time, they said, well, we need some kind of signed contract in place. So they signed it back in 2010. But, they were actually started inside of there. It sounds like it started in 2004. I think they finished up 5-6 area that it was up, open and functioning. So it's a question of what's their start date that they actually consider it by. But if you're going by a legal contract that have signatures on it, that was signed in 2010. But they were open to the
What are we
discussion.
going by?
According to our attorney, what would stand up would probably be 2010. But if If the contract is broke, what they could do is prorate it out for the amount of time potentially to pay out or off the lease. But there's many questions to be asked to get to that point right now.
And can you remind me if that lease were to be terminated, what the cost for us as a city would be for the county?
So it wasn't spelled out as far as would they be able to prorate it from the date that it kind of started. So that would considerably be a lot less than, well, their actual construction costs, like I said, were a little over $5 million. So I guess that would go down to the lawyers saying, well, is it $5 million, or do you prorate that $5 million of the time that they've already spent there to when the end of the contract would be, which if they went with the longer idea of that contract, it would be 2030. So we would still have another 6 years if that's the date that we had to go off of.
So it's no different than this other contract that we're going to be getting into for the community center where there's the length of time and we need to be able to keep it open for that amount of time.
Tied to
So
it.
it's 37 years for that one.
And the
Yep.
other agreement you're talking about is the dollars accepting by what the state has said that they
Yeah.
give us.
Yeah, just like when she mentioned what the county is, we're kind of at the same deal when it comes to what we're signing up for the other thing too.
The way the contract reads is they take what they call the useful life of a facility. We did an original calculation, we used 40 years, but I wanted to get it straight from Deed, who carries out the bonding. And they said, well, we generally anywhere from a neighborhood of 25 to 35 years. So we picked 30 right down the middle, and they said that you need to be vested in that for 125% of its useful life, and that brings us to the 37 and a half years.
I'm just the difference, you know.
Yep.
The county we have, you know, with this one and how long and how things change over the years, that's a long time for both contracts.
Yes.
The one point to keep in mind is we haven't discussed in group, in council, anything that came from the county and come from Deed as far as what this represents. And all of that is subject to revision. So we can collectively go through it and decide if there's things we can and can't live without. To your point, I think 37 and a half years is excessive. So it's my understanding that for virtually every point is negotiable that's on there, and we can then make our recommendations and submit back. And I think you've heard the same as well, that, you know, we can present what we would like back to them to see where they are.
It sounds like it has the potential of being moldable, yes. And that's coming from people who have experience and have received monies in the past through the bonding process. I don't know how much leeway that takes, but
Right.
that's a conversation to be had with Deed.
What's next?
I guess if you guys don't have any further questions, it's your option to open it up if the public wants to give input, but if they do, you have to only talk about what's at hand, the information about the community center.
Do we have any more information on our side for our staff that we're going over, or is that, or was
Just
the
that-
presentation, is it?
That was it, correct, yes.
On my end, we came into this last year. We knew Wold was part of this. I would like to see a chronology of how did this come to play? What was decided? Kokoro was in there. They were, under my impression, they put money on the table and said, we'll buy the facility. It was agreed upon that we didn't sell it. Now, this is stuff that I'm understanding, so I'm not putting facts or anything on that table, but what I understand is that we chose not to sell it to them, that the city has decided to keep it, unsure of whatever we were gonna do in the future. Wold was brought on, Craig was brought on, and that's all I got.
I can give you what I know up to this. I wasn't involved at this level back then, but, so the community center has been closed down for about 12 years now. It just wasn't financially viable. It was too much subsidization from the city and other funds. So they're looking at closing it, then ended up having a hockey group came in, and they did a lease with them for a little while. That ended up not working out after a bit, and that's when Kokorol came along, and they were interested in the gymnasium for that space. They grew since the time that they went in there, brought in a couple other vendors with physical therapist, chiropractic, and that kind of brings us up to, just a few years ago when they decided to build their own facility and move into that. I know that's pretty broad, but generally how we got to where we are. A lot of side discussions, but more the planning aspect of things, so they weren't necessarily things that were voted on by council at the time, but, I believe the city manager at the time was talking with different people through the legislator. They would looked in a while back before I got involved of going to the legislator for some kind of bonding money. I don't think they just quite got to that point. But there were just concerns of the cost that we needed to do something different than what we were doing to keep it working.
I guess I'm leaning to council members that have been involved in this and placing it on the table and helping us understand what's happening. What happened? What got you guys here? You guys went to the legislator.
So I think there's a whole lot that hasn't been discussed or addressed, especially with the new presence of the three of you. I would put it back on staff and put the responsibility back on them to have them bring everyone up to speed at the same time so that we address everything. The building did have 2 offers for sale, both of which were turned down by council. And there's a whole lot of things that have happened we've been together 3 years, 2.5, somewhere in there, that happened prior to and up to bringing Wold on board. A lot of discussion that I think it would be incumbent upon the due diligence to be presented to the council. Lisa, do you have any, Councilmember Wong, do you have any other?
No, I certainly think that a chronological explanation would be very helpful to, and very foundational for you all to understand how we got here, because there are a lot of components to it. And it's not really just a straight, line situation. There's a lot of different things at play. And so I think that would be really helpful if we had that laid out, and then we can have a conversation about some more details when we have all of that information right in front of us.
Does that help? Doesn't give you an answer tonight, but
No,
does
I
that?
mean, it does help, but what I find interesting is that we're having this meeting on the community center, and it's stated as community center discussion, and then find out Wold is here presenting, yet where's the rest of the information regarding the community center? We're supposed to discuss something on the community center, and we're discussing a presentation that Wold completed 18 months ago? Is that what it was?
No, yeah, I mean, it was,
I'm sorry,
yeah, no, that's fine. It was maybe complete 6 months ago.
okay.
Around the time that that bonding bill kind of came to pass is about the time that we kind of concluded our study. Just, for no other reason than that's just how the timeline worked out.
Thank you. So then we receive this. We get the packet. There's 75 pages in this. In 24 hours, we all work full-time jobs, and we're supposed to look at this and come to the table just to listen to a presentation, and we're supposed to have a conversation about the community center.
Would you want to go over that, your PowerPoint? And if we go over that by each page, it may spark questions that they come up because, like I said, 3 of the people that were here haven't been involved in that step-by-step process, especially like the core group.
We did read it, we just don't know the history behind what we see there, too. That's part of it as well.
Would that be helpful for you for?
I mean,
For any sort of discussion, yes. I mean, we're supposed to discuss this in front of the community. We're having a special meeting on this. This is it.
And right now, what we discussed is what has been out in the newsletter as far as what we've seen and what the public has seen, the grants and things like that. So that's the information I've received, and that's what I'm looking at, is to try to understand that.
Can we do that?
Yeah, I'm fine going back through stuff. I mean,
Let's do that, please. Let's go over the
I'll say that
PowerPoint.
the information that we have is thank you, Wold, for doing this work. I think, it gives us a really great, large picture of what needs to be done and a plan forward. Does it probably need to be revisited now that there have been changes, as he had alluded to, because Public Works has done a lot of the work? Yeah, so that could change it as well. And so I think there's opportunity for us to also revisit this at another time, but I think what has been put before us really does lay out a very simple, straightforward way on the building component. I think one thing that we have not discussed at all is the financial operations piece. And so I think that's completely missing. And so the information that does go out or has gone out only refers to expenses and does not refer to what revenue could do and what that could look like.
Right, and that was one of the unknowns, I believe that was in that as well, that just because we don't have anybody that's signed up or any kind of lease in place to, so,
yeah.
but we had the potential there that, yeah, it would certainly affect.
Right now,
the
this is
cost.
just tell us what the building, what are we gonna do with the building? We know what it's gonna take to get it fixed, and pretty much it's gonna bring it back up to 1992. We're not changing the inside as far as rooms and things like that. We're bringing it back up to the way it was when it first happened. It's pretty much by the looks of, fixing doorways, painting inside, and replacing the gym floor, which we all see as in beds. The big thing is, what are we gonna do with it, and where is it gonna benefit? And now that we got, as far as numbers, thank you again for the numbers, and we got from the legislator what the stipulations and terms are, then we have to, for me, for part of that too, is understand, is that something that we're good with as far as the terms and things like that as well?
I'm sorry, can you reframe that? I didn't understand it.
Sure. We know how much it costs now as far as the, how much it costs to fix the building up. That part of it too is part of
Sure.
it. And then to understand with the grants, what the terms are, what we have to live with inside the grants is what I was talking about.
What are the terms that you have concerns about?
The years, I do, how long?
37 and a half years?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about the library now and what we're gonna do if we had to get out of that, and that's, so I just wanna make sure that that's a long time out, 37 and a half years.
I guess my question is, what's to say that we can't have a plan 37 and a half years out to accommodate for costs?
We don't have a plan now, so I don't know a plan 37 and a half years out, what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, and so I find it kind of difficult to suggest that the terms can't be accomplished or met without an initial plan. So I
If
guess,
we had the money and we did this ourselves, we would be in control of how it works. It already failed once as far as the community center in 2012, and it hasn't been open since. So now we're guaranteeing somebody else the length of, so it's a lot that we need to put in, and that's part of the whole picture of it too as well, in my mind.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have this building, it's been sitting here for quite a long time, 12 years. It hasn't been utilized by the public, unfortunately. I think it still can be used. Kokoro was using it, and honestly, I don't know why we haven't been for the last 12 years, opening it up to the public to rent out and use just like we do other park systems. And so I think with that said, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about what the needs are, and what the payment and revenue could be,
Yeah.
and explore those models, because the amount of money that the state and the federal government have given us is $5.35 million. That's over 70% of what is here. And this is over a long period of time. We're already at 70% of that in year one. That's a big deal. That's a big investment. And I would just really, caution that there are no ways to do it, but there are certainly, I think that we need to give it more opportunity to understand a little bit more about what our potential is.
Yep, and part of that is the financial, and that's what I've been looking at too, as far, because I don't have any information on the others. It closed in 2012, it was 350,000 loss in 2012, so they closed it. So we have to learn from our past too, to make sure we don't repeat it. That's my point.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I don't think always an old model works. And I also think that our demographics have changed substantially. And so there are a lot of different needs in our community that, hockey is not going to fly anymore. That didn't work out for the hockey team. But we do have volleyball teams, from my understanding, knocking at our door wanting to use our gym. So I just am wondering why, we can't make that an opportunity.
Is that,
There are opportunities on the table. It's not that we can't visit them. Revenue is a great resource, but we can't always utilize it specifically to revenue. If we don't open it up to the community and we're renting it out all the time, then what's the purpose of all of us in the community paying for it? Again, I have no idea where the dollars are coming from. We have a grant that was awarded to us. We're not sure what that looks like. We're not sure what the community center looks like right now. But we have to have some sort of plan and identify what are we going to do with this community center. And right now, what we know is that we were granted the dollars, we did not want to sell the facility, and we're having a discussion, and now we need to really figure out what we're going to do, because we don't know what the timeline is on this money either. This could be, I don't know when, I can't even put something down, but we need to start discussing this, because those dollars can be taken away from us.
well, you reached out and said Deed's been getting a hold of you, Brian, to see where we're at, correct?
They have, I believe, the whole process, I believe they allot 5 years. So, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for the planning process by bringing in the architects, the layout of what we're looking at, and also the plan and goal of what those uses will be. And then all of that information is turned back into Deed. They go over it and then approve or deny or mold it into what works for what was asked for the grant to begin with. So, but like I said, they do have the ability to mold that a little bit.
Couple other things that I think should be included as we take a look at the chronological order. One thing that hasn't been provided is what was submitted to the House and Senate to for them to provide the funding. Keep in mind that both Lisa and I testified. I testified in front of the House and in front of the Senate, and Councilmember Wong testified in front of the House for this funding. The legislature voted and approved funding from state taxpayer dollars to come to North St. Paul. So keep that in mind as well as we look at things. Not only did the prior council see the benefit in it, so did the state to invest their funding into our direction. So I think it's imperative that that information be shared. And I'm hearing that the results of the community center meeting that was held, that Jonathan referenced, that probably should be represented to this group as well, because it was very well attended. It was very positive. There were individuals in there who would love to have signed a lease that night, I think, with what it would do. One of them was a youth program. So there's information that still isn't been brought on board, and not to sound preachy, but the responsibility of the council is to not draw a conclusion of a project or of an event or of a comment until all sides have been heard. And I am currently feeling that decisions are being decided based on financials alone. And that's not necessarily the way they look, because we haven't taken a look at what this is going to do and provide to the community. Just 80% business support combined with a lot of support here. There's a lot of backbone support for this community center. What's incumbent upon us is to figure out what that looks like going forward. We haven't talked about that yet. So to draw a conclusion to the outcome of the community center is premature. And I guess I ask that the remainder of the council remain open to it. I haven't decided where I stand. If it's strictly financial, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we haven't weighed in the benefits, the revenue sources, the public funding. We haven't taken a look or discussed or even talked to anybody about any of that yet. So I would just kind of like to level set the group, because this is a multi-meeting conversation.
Well, I've done 3 tours of the community center with different groups too. So I have not, as far as being open, I've, wanted to make sure that we had the guerrilla war vets from the Vietnam. They wanted to look at it. We've had a couple other groups look at it. So we have had groups come through when there was opportunities for them. So we have given tours for that as well.
Yeah, that's good information to know. I think also, what are the inquiries that we're having around the community center? I think there's been changes in the last year and a half. So, we've heard some volleyball teams, we've heard some organizations. What are they asking for? I think that's something that's, not captured in our presentation today because time has changed. And I also think the scope of it, we're looking very much at, the businesses in town, which are really important. And there's a lot of other folks, interested in it that expand beyond our boundaries.
And Brian was there during those tours as well. The feedback we had, of course, the building, they like the layout of the building, but the biggest thing we had is there's no yard, because both of those groups wanted to have some outdoor thing and parking. Those are the 2 things that were the most common as far as, it's kind of deceiving. You look over and they think the apartment building is the community center yard, and it's only a couple feet off of it, and then it starts their property. So that was a couple of things we had there.
Question, and I'm not sure who to direct this at, so I apologize. One of the phrases I've heard lately is 80% of the businesses. Can you tell me where that data came from so I can research that a little bit more? Was it 80% of the business in attendance, or was a poll put out?
Yeah, so I guess I've been saying of the 22 different groups that we met with, we actually went through a pretty extensive list of all of the businesses and groups within North St. Paul and sort of determined all the different folks we were going to meet with. And 80% is based on my gut check like 5 minutes before I walked in here. But of the 22, I think there was pretty large support for use of the community center. Now, I use the term use very generally because I think that it has different components depending on what different group we met with. But, I'll just say use of it or support for it was pretty large amongst the 22 groups that we met with. And it's all information we have, and we can certainly share that. I think if you read through the comments in that sort of presentation, you'll see sort of where the support lies from those different groups.
To address that a little more, we sat down collaboratively as a group and identified any business, any entity, whether it be church, bar, a youth group that could potentially have need or use for the community center. And I think that list was brought down to 22, lack of a better definition, businesses or groups within the city, at which point in time, Wold did extensive interviews with each one of them. So it wasn't, you tell me, they went to them to solicit whether it was up or down.
Yeah, we made a point to basically go to their place of business and be on their turf. I think that helps with that conversation, so that was part of that process as well.
Like, for example, I believe the VFW was contacted, or at least the Legion was, and they already have space. So to them, they didn't necessarily see some of the uses as a smaller group that would have lots of needs to do things provided, whether it be business space or recreation space. And I think a lot of that was in the questions. So
Yep.
I believe it's all in the packet for the most part, but does that help?
It does, because I was hearing 80% of businesses, so I didn't know if,
80% of the 22.
oh, okay, I'm very data-driven in my life, so I just wasn't sure where that data was coming from. I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah.
And I myself, I reached out to the Conway gentleman that sent us the email, just to have a little discussion with him too. And, you know, when it comes to their location, it's more partnership. When people say use, you know, we're not looking at the old style community center. It's more of a partnership where you have different partners with you on that. It's not just, oh yeah, if you have space, we'll use it, we'll rent it here and there for our once-a-year meeting or something like that. To me, in my mind, it's a full partnership, it's a partnership with that, because we have our 37 and a half years, we have our amount of time we need to have it, so we need to have people with that as far as a partnership.
And it sounds like the library, you said, is interested in continuing to partner. Is that how I understood your statement earlier?
Correct, yes.
Is that partnership going forward with, after 2000, is there any kind of, because right now, they don't pay electricity, they don't pay cleaning,
Nope,
they don't pay a thing.
correct. They just paid for the cost of the addition onto it. But they like the facility, and they have use for, you know, the kids coming in and doing story time and things like that. They have high usage on, and that's what they like to continue on with. And they've said that it's, as far as a lease and making payments, they don't know that that's in the cards. They have their flagships of Maplewood and Roseville, and that's where they put the most of their time and effort. But they still said this is a very good used.
When you say not in the cards, it's not
They do
being,
not have funding available
pay
now
rent.
or
Okay.
in the near future.
so it's, you know, we provide a facility, they'll provide us a library. Is that what you're saying?
That's where we're at right now. And
Okay.
plus, the people who we met with, they weren't the decision makers, and they don't know what, they're still expecting that they would have until the end of this decade. So they certainly haven't put money aside. And they did shut down their Maplewood last year because they did some renovations and updates. And the next one will be, I think Roseville, with some money they're going to put into that. So, and this isn't even in the cards right now.
And you mentioned, Tim, and you agreed that you can massage some of these,
I don't know exactly what that means, but I believe
because one of the ones I was reading here, it says, you know, for other Minnesota legislature use, for time to time, they could use the facility. So what would that look like? What is that?
We don't know what that means.
That's, I'm just saying,
You want to have a meeting there?
that's what came out, or what else they're gonna use it for. Everything is so broad here
Yep.
on this stuff, but that's one that grabbed my eye. It's from time to time, they can use the facility for what they deem fit. So that's something where we have to understand too.
So that's why I suggest that we probably have another workshop just to go through that and put our concerns down. And I would think that would be one that legal should probably be in attendance, as well as, I don't know if there's an expert in the field that could help guide us and direct us, but at least help form us to what that could look like, because there might be some deal breakers on there, to your point. So,
Are there any time deadlines that we should be aware of? I mean, and I know that we might not know the answer to that question, but are there any hurdles or time deadlines that are coming to help us plan on how to make these decisions, to give us some goalposts?
so. The requirements are that, I believe this process, they give you 5 years, but a lot of these steps take a long time. The planning aspect, the laying out of the architecture, you know, then bringing that all together, turning it into deed, them going through it all, then us going out to bid for contractors if we move forward. It's all a very long time span that it takes to do all these things. So, and we're at the point now that we either need to start spending money to make this moving forward, or we need to decide if this isn't going to happen. So that's why, and this is good to have this meeting and get to know exactly what information that I can get back to you, so we can move forward with that.
Can you speak more to that deadline?
That has not been a line in the sand. It is just the time process it takes for all this. But it sure sounds like people who did get bonding money have turned in their information by now. They're further along in the process, so Deed has just been questioning, where are you at? What, do you have the information for us yet, or where are we at in that process?
So us as new members here, brand new mayor, that type of thing, when it comes to it, you're asking for us what the next step is. What is the role of the city manager for this process to keep it going? Is it us five that have to, say things as far as to get things moving, or is there a plan that we're going off of as far as to continue to keep this ball rolling and getting all the information we need, that type of thing? How does that look?
So this process started a while back. Like I said, even the city manager before me, they started the process. Then they formed that core group, and Lisa and Tim were on that group. And if they can expand more, that's great. But it's finding out exactly what you want to do with it, what uses are there. And we kind of threw out ideas, whether it would be helpful for community education, programs for potential the vets, or for kids after-school uses. So it was just seeing what ideas could be thrown out there and might gain legs and traction by.
And where are those things that were out there?
We had that drawn up in that core group. We'll have to pull that out.
But that's what I'm trying to get. There's such a disconnect between us three and what's happening.
That's why I had requested a chronology of events. Who was involved? Why were they involved? When did all this begin? Where did it begin? That way we can grasp an idea of everything. Financially, we're getting a lot of financials like Councilmember Cole put out there. We're looking at financials. We gotta look beyond this. I mean, yeah, there's revenue. It could generate revenue, but where did all this begin? And then let's start from there and figure out what are the needs and where are we? So then we can make an educated decision on, all right, we are for or we are against, or we don't know yet what we're gonna do at the community center, but we were granted these dollars. We know what Wold is presenting to us. Are these individuals that have gone through the original study still believe what's being said? How did we get to the point that we went to get lobbyists, had Tim and Lisa at the legislature advocating for the city of North St. Paul? All of this will help shed light not only to the current council, but also our community members. I would really like to see that, and I would like to see this continue into workshops, because this is a desired and expressed to not only the city community members, businesses, brought to council. We need to keep this going. So the more information we can get, the sooner, the better we can continue this ball rolling.
And understand some of the history. This should go out to, in the newsletter, whatever, as far as the groups and what happened beforehand, because a lot of it is, I think we just got to make sure it's still relevant.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as who was involved in that core group, we knew that this process was just starting, and we knew that some people were not running again for the next council, so the only two obvious picks were the people that we knew still had, the last half of their 4 years, or at least this round of their election process, that they would be on it, since we were going to have new people coming in. And it was still just shooting ideas out to see what the needs are for the city. It was.
I get that, but we asked for money. So then it became, when I asked Victoria Reinhardt, when I called her up to see what kind of options, when we were talking to her, she goes, well, why would you ask for a grant before you had a plan? So like she kind of chastised me a little bit of, where's your plan? And I said, well, we're working on it now. And that's where she brought in a couple of those groups that may be a fit for that type of thing. But it seems like the cart was before the horse a little bit, maybe.
And I just knew that that Kokoro was going to be moving on, being that we weren't going to sell the property, so we had to try and find out an idea of does this building still work? What are the needs of the community? And it was just a group pulled together to look into that. And you guys were involved before I don't know if you guys had any more input on the coming together of that group. And
Yeah, I mean, I think Wold kind of outlined it as they were updating us on their feasibility study and who they've been talking to. And I think, you know, thinking about funding, that is an important aspect of it. And the legislature was up. And so, yeah, there probably could have been a lot more plans in place. And I'll say that we had some direction from staff on what that would look like. And so I wasn't going to go up and say, you know, whatever. I was going off of what was provided to me.
Yeah, and when I got involved, it was still in the exploratory stage. There were a lot of good ideas out there, whether or not it was, you know, for kids after school stuff or whatever programs, but nothing had been decided of for sure that I'm interested in this and we are willing to be partners with you to get into a long-term type lease thing. We hadn't gotten to that point since I've been involved.
I know Food Shelf was one, but I know they got their place now. School, I met with, this was a while back with Christine. Is it Christine?
Yes.
Yeah, and, you know, she said they had enough space, but if there was something available, the people I've talked to so far is if there was something available, they could use it. So that's where we have to see where people, you know, are gonna lock in and be able to work with us, and partner up.
I don't think we're gonna have a hard time finding people to rent that facility. In my early career, I rented facilities in a university. There are people that are gonna come knocking on that door. I'm not concerned about that. I don't think the city should be even concerned about that. People will knock on the door to utilize that space. Overall, we need to figure out, what are we gonna do with this community center? Where did it all begin? Again, I'm asking for the chronology of everything. I want full transparency. Where are we financially with this? What is it costing us monthly? What did it cost for the lobbyists? Where are we with this? And once we lay it all out, we'll be able to decide. But right now, we're discussing, well, we think we're gonna have some people, we know we've talked to this people and we've talked to these people, now they may not have the space for it. What are we gonna do with the community center?
Well, it sounds like the library is part of that discussion. And that needs to be front of mind, I think, for us as we discuss this, and it has been. I think there's still disagreement on when that date, what that date counts as. And I think that there's still, a lot of questions out there, for sure. And there's a lot more information that we need to gather. And oftentimes, there are dedicated staff who do this. And that's because we didn't. That's why I think Dr. Waldron and Wold was hired on to start to explore that. And so I think that's kind of where we're at in terms of the information. There still needs to be a lot more information on the table. Totally agreed. I don't know how much we spent on the lobbyists, to be honest. I don't remember at this point. But we did invest. It was a collective decision on behalf of the city council at the time that we would go forth and make that investment. So it was a discussion at some point.
And now we're at the point where we're getting some numbers back and some different things where now it's the council up here's turn to make sure we're going the right direction.
Yes, and I can answer what was spent on lobbyists. It was $36,000. And we've done some upgrades to the community center just for the sake that they had completely stopped working and we had to do things. I mean, spent $35,000 on just a patch to get the roof through last winter. The boilers had to be replaced because they failed, so it just needs a lot of work. I know that before, utility costs for the building were anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000 a year. There were some of these costs that were gathered.
And can you talk a little bit about the electrical systems in the community center? That's our fiber optics, correct?
There's an IT room over there that works as kind of a backbone. We have the main junction point, if you will, here at City Hall, but there's a backup room down there for the fiber system that we have, the backbone. We are also tied to that building through the generator that's down there. The generator is needed clearly for the Public Works building because we are the people that respond when the emergency stuff happens, power outages, things like such. So that runs that building and the community center. So that would have to be moved back across the street. I think those both would be sizable costs, maybe a couple $100,000 to move those two units across there, depending on what we do with the building. So we're tied to that building a bit.
And in terms of our fiber optics, like looking at that from even a financial standpoint, where are we looking at generating revenue now on that fiber optic?
It generates revenue. It has a long way to go to pay itself off. It was millions of dollars were spent on that. And I'm sorry, I do not know the numbers off the top of my head. Dan, is it $150,000 a year that we get off of revenue off of that? 25 more years to have it.
How long would it start? Was, because I remember when it went around the area, like 99, like the late 90s, early 2000s, where they tried to do fiber to the whole neighborhood? Okay. Because the backbone was put in for the whole entire city, and it didn't pass, so all that money was spent up front, and it's been sitting there, except for a few businesses, I think.
I am one of five, and I know we can't vote, so I don't know how to ask this. And this goes back to something Brian said earlier. In my opinion, this is one of the most well-attended meetings we've had in a long time. Brian, you said we could have public comment?
Did you get that okay from the city attorney?
I
As long
feel
as
we'd
it's
be
specifically on
remiss
this.
if we didn't allow it. Obviously, there's people with a lot of opinions. Like I say, I'm only one of five, so I don't know how to bring up stuff in a workshop we can't vote on. I'd appreciate guidance from anybody.
Yeah, it's just public input. I mean, it's important to you guys.
I believe you had mentioned something like that you have a specific amount of time. Is that?
It's normally the 3 minutes that you give to when you open to the public.
I mean,
If anybody like to speak? Go. Oh, wait a minute.
let's start from the back.
Carrie? You're already standing, you can. Name and address, please.
I'm Carrie Blease. I live at 2887 Lake Boulevard in North St. Paul. I too, Councilmember Nordby, I'm a numbers person. So when, 80% kept getting repeated, I actually have Wold's proposal on my phone and I was flipping through the pages. So there were 22 different labeled as business entities that were surveyed. 14 of those are not-for-profits, churches, other, 501c3 kind of people. 6 are businesses. One was Kokoro. They're not in town anymore. Of those businesses, one business said no. They did not support the community center at all. One business said they would like the parking lot space would be great. One business said they wanted a specific type of recreation space. Then there were 2 other, one person that looked like he was an individual, a Lions Club person, and a condominium association. So out of those 22, I think 14 not-for-profits, of course they're going to want to use a free space. Like, I would love to use a free space for my little nonprofit that I'm involved with. But I think that it's and even our Wold representative said that was his gut reaction that people were in favor of it. And I think that's part of understanding where those numbers come from. And we don't have a huge, big business community in North St. Paul. We're not like other suburbs where we've got, we do have Target. Target wasn't on the list. We've got, the medical clinic, not on the list. Some other bigger businesses, the Flex, what's it called? done.
Reflex Medical?
Like, they're not on the list. So there are some other businesses that just, if we're going to talk about businesses in favor of it, then maybe we do want to do a more extensive thing. And yes, I would love to have some more community meetings. I mean, I was at the other community meeting where there was, 35 people, but it was half kids. And there were a couple of really, really vocal, almost, I wrote down on my paper, loud people that, and I don't want just the loudest voices to be heard, but how can we, in a town with no more newspaper, our Facebook group doesn't allow any political discussions, how do we get people involved and to let you know what they think? That's hard. So anyway, thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, who wants to go ahead? Name and address, all that?
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Armitage. I live in North St. Paul, 2584 Swan Avenue, and I've been in the community for 21 years. Happy to have been here and happy to have raised my family here. I'm here representing Ashland Productions, Inc. It's a nonprofit. You might be aware of it, just a mile and a half down the road. We operate out of the Maplewood Community Center. We're in year 8 of a 10-year lease. Now, normally 2 years would be plenty of time, but if you're looking for a theater, that's a more difficult entity to get after. So yeah, we're very actively looking. I can't answer all the questions you guys brought up. There's a whole lot of stuff y'all need to do. But I can offer one suggestion. Please consider Ashland as a candidate for occupying this facility. I think that we would make a wonderful anchor. We're not asking to have exclusive rights to the building. And yes, we are a nonprofit, but we pay. We pay rent. And so I think that, what we could do is not only bringing to the city of North St. Paul a meaningful art-focused entity, and this is a theater that's child-focused, youth-focused. It is the most accepting environment I've ever been in. From a diversity perspective, whether you're talking about color, sexual orientation, this is a welcoming environment. I think Ashland would be a jewel for North St. Paul. We would love to work with you. We think we have a lot to offer, not just in terms of artistic contributions to the community, but financially. We can work with you guys. I know that there are going to be other people. Councilmember Schwer, you said people are going to come out of the woodwork. There are going to be people who want to use that facility. Ashland Productions is one of them. And we're ready to talk. And appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Welcome.
I'm Jerry Lemke at 2097 Charles Street North. I just think it's too expensive, I don't know if you have to look at, or if you have to spend all the time to, consider what to do when the numbers kind of speak for themselves, you don't, considering it's gonna be $1 million for the first year, well, add cost of living to that for 37 and a half years, by the time you're at the end of that, everyone in the whole city is gonna be paying for it, the only viable solution, maybe if you can get, people like Ashland or other businesses to commit to 37 and a half years, just as the city would be willing to commit to 37 and a half years. Maybe that would be an option, but you'd have to have it in writing, legal, if they back out early, they have to pay, whatever they're gonna pay to the end, just like we would, if it's gonna be that kind of thing. That could work, but I bet you wouldn't get anyone to bite on it because it's just too, that's the kind of commitment you're talking about. It's a big deal. So, that's my 2 cents, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My comment, please. I know I was just up there. Would you mind? 15 seconds.
Go ahead.
So the last gentleman, he said you're looking for people, it would make sense because you got to run the place for 37 and a half years. You got to look for somebody who's got staying power. Ashland's 25 years old this year. We are as strong as we have ever been. A long-term lease, long-term usage of that center, that does not deter us at all. Thank you.
Lane. Welcome.
Haven't seen you here in a while. Welcome.
It's just wonderful to be here.
Back home
So,
again.
I came here thinking I probably would hear some discussion about the plan for the actual use, not the costs. Those were in the council packet. So I guess what I'm looking for potentially, or my suggestion would be, put together a timeline and figure out, here's when we need this information so we can start having real discussions. Because I agree, people might come out of the woodwork that you never expected. I don't know how you could possibly even know what to do next if you don't first get some of the information that you all say you need. And I understand the turmoil over the past 3 years or so, but I'm less interested in the history than in what are we going to do going forward. Because there are going to be costs, and there'll be operational costs. So I would just suggest you come up with some kind of timeline for staff so that they know what you need and when you need it, or when you're expecting it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Don't be a stranger.
Yes, sir.
Hello, good sir.
Good afternoon.
Cameron Muick, 2596 4th Avenue East. And I want to encourage you folks to not simply think about this from the dollar cost standpoint and what can it bring to the community. I think that, for example, if we do something that loses us the library here, that's going to be a tremendous deficit to this community. And quite frankly, I think as we have a population that is aging, it's better to have some things available here in the city and not tell people who have a problem getting around that they have to go over to another city to use their community center. Now, it's obvious we can't do as much as a larger town can do, but we can do some things. And there may be a possibility for using the community center for other things to generate revenue for or offset costs. For example, possibly putting solar panels on the building to help, defray the cost of electricity for the city and that type of thing. So there may be other uses that will help bring the dollar cost of operating the building down. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Correct, you can't.
I mean, not even next November?
Nope. Come on up, sir.
I'm George Sin. I live at 2411 11th Avenue here in North St. Paul. 72 years. I was around when Bob Gaddy decided that we needed a community center, and he plunked it down in the middle of the wrong place. So I have avoided going in that building as much as possible because my belief is it was built in the wrong place. On a side note, I had to go in there and ask the tenants to get their buses out of our parking lot at Franklin Center on more than one occasion. And we've given up parking, that is our private parking, to tenants that the city brought into that building because there's not enough parking for a tenant in that building. If the city's going to spend money to fix the building, from what I saw, and I'm short of memory on it, but I believe you're looking at over $1 million just to get some basic stuff done. You had a $350,000 loss 12 years ago. You cannot get enough revenue without charging every household in North St. Paul a minimum of $100 to fund the community center. And based on my experience in this town, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get enough people to make use of it to keep it from being an albatross. The city of Maplewood has leased theirs out to the YMCA and the other groups in order to defray the costs. So are you going to be a landlord of a building that you can't fill? and you've got grant money coming from the state of Minnesota from last session or this session or whatever, you're willing to take on all of the tentacles that go with other government agencies' money when you take it? You guys got a lot to think about. And I don't see the value in that building, in that place for this town, the size that it is. We're at about 13,500 residents, more or less. So that translates to about 4,000 homes, more or less. And I don't know what businesses we're talked to. You got 6 bars, a florist shop, a couple of barber shops, the pizza place, another pizza place in the other shopping mall that's closing its doors in a building that is 98% vacant. City's got a lot of things to think about, and putting more money into that building would not be high on my list. And I would vote against anybody that voted to spend more money on that building at this point without a better plan. And from what I've heard tonight, there isn't a better plan. You guys are still tossing the balls up in the air trying to figure it out. And I appreciate the juggling act, but somewhere along the line, somebody's got to put their foot down and say, okay, it's going to cost us $2 million to do this. We can get $800,000 in revenue for a 5-year lease. Is that going to cut it for us if we can find that?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
John, excuse me, John Schmall, 2750 Chisholm Avenue. It's hard to follow what I just followed. A very, very, very important presentation. And just commenting on that, on the theater group, you just brought up the big problem with that building. And if you ever drove by the Maplewood Civic Center, or whatever it is, you would see the number of cars parked in that parking lot. And that's the number one problem with our community center, no parking. I would vote no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll continue on. All right, thank you, everyone.
We'll continue to have more conversation, and we'll get the information together you guys are looking for, and bring it back up at a council meeting where people have the ability of stepping up and having their comments heard again.
So our next council meeting is
Next week,
first, is
next
it?
Tuesday.
And okay.
It's a short time frame for getting out the agenda, but we can get together what we can.
All right,
I do have one comment before we adjourn.
sure.
There was an article in Sunday's Star Trib about community centers. We're not the only ones facing this. It was not necessarily in-depth, but it talked about several communities that were investing in excess of $120,000 into a community center, and other community centers that were just looking for a little help, some communities that are evaluating the necessary needs. So I appreciate everybody's attendance. This obviously is a very passionate topic to all the residents as well as the council. We're not in it alone. A lot of the communities that were referenced in the article are going in front of the House and the Senate for funding now. We're ahead of that curve. So we've got that benefit. But there are a lot of aging community centers out there. And so it's incumbent upon us to make the correct decision as to what we do with ours. So we're not in it alone. There's a lot of passion here. We can agree to disagree. That's a wonderful thing. With that, Jonathan, I want to thank you again for hanging with us as long as you have. And I'm done.
Anybody else have any last comments?
I thank everybody out here for coming.
Yes.
Everyone that has emailed all of us has taken their time to tell us how you feel about it. I know I've emailed several of those individuals back indicating to them that we are going to have this meeting to come to these meetings. So I appreciate every one of you out here attending this.
Yes, same, and just understand, we're trying to get all the information out we can, so be able to, everybody see what's happening and just understand it, because it is a big decision. It's a big commitment, big decision, and as our community, our size, it's very important, so I appreciate everybody attending tonight, and thank you. If nothing else, I'll call to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
So move, Councilmember Cole.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Wong. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.